Madhu, I made you host and start the recording. You can start anytime, please.
Yeah, thanks, Sudarshan. Okay, let's get started. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo antaha pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akila shaktidhara swadamna अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथाभूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good afternoon, everyone. We are in the 9th lecture of Katha Upanishad, which, as you know, is part of the Krishna Yajur Veda. So we will directly dig in. So where did we leave last time? So we are in the third, it's on the context of the third boon. And there is this dialogue that is going on between Yama and Nachiketa. And Yama has still not started discussing the philosophy of what is the greatness of the Supreme and how does he control the Jiva in Mukti and what are his greatness, what are his Mahimas. He's not even started these philosophical discussions yet, but there is a very interesting dialogue that is happening between Nachiketa and Yama. And as you can recall, Yama initially offers him all sorts of material wealth and attractions to distract Nachiketa from asking these big questions of philosophy. And Nachiketa then says, no, I don't want this. He offers him money, he offers him wealth, he offers him everything, even from the Devalokas, and our friend Nachiketa refuses that. And then at that point, Yama is really impressed with Nachiketa and he keeps on praising him. He goes on and praises him again and again. And that is also is an examination that Yama is doing. Yama is testing Nachiketa from various angles. So in this section where this ongoing discussions between Yama and Nachiketa, where Yama is constantly praising Nachiketa, how good you are, how big you are. He's constantly praising him and testing whether Nachiketa is now is going to become egoistic or not, because that is one of the biggest threats towards spiritual progress, is to get egoistic about ourselves and the fact that we are in the path of spiritual realization. If that ego sets in, and that is that will be the reason for our downfall. So Yama is testing those things. When you watch the language of the Upanishads, it's very clear. So let's look at the verses. Anyad shreyo anyad uta eva preyaha te ube nana arte purusham sinitaha tayo shreyaha adadanasya sadhu bhavati hiyate artat yavu preyo vrinite Sattvam priyan priyarupamshcha kaman abidyayan nachiketo atyasrakshihi naitam shrunkam vittamayim avaptau yasyam majjanti bahavo manushyaha shreyashta preyashta manushyam yetaha tau samparitya vivinakti dhiraha shreyo hi dhiro abhipreyaso vrinite preyo mando yogokshemam vrinite. Duram ete viparite vishuchi avidya yacha vidyeti jnata vidya abhipsitam nachiketasam manye natva kama bahavo alolupanta. So in these 4 verses, he says, look, there are people who choose 2 paths in their life. One is the path of Shreyas and the other one is the path of prayers. Now, we have dealt with this quite a lot over the last couple of weeks. Just a brief reminder here. Shreyas, that is that path which in the short term appears to be very difficult, but in the long term, that is the right thing for us. Whereas prayers is the path which in the short term appears to be pleasant and pleasurable, but actually in the long term is actually injurious to us. So that is the prayer. And our Guru Yama has said, folks that follow a path towards knowledge or vidya are actually going towards Shreyas. Whereas those that are covered by ignorance or avidya, are following this path towards prayers. And from this figure, you can see it's only very few who follow the path of Shreyas, whereas majority of humans follow the path of prayers. And the key driving force for the path of prayers is this concept of avidya or ignorance. So in these 4 verses, what Yama is saying is, Nachiketa, you are so big. You have chosen the path of Shreyas. I'm really impressed with you. I'm really proud of you. But look at most of the jivas, most of the mundane people. What are they doing? They're following the path of prayers. And that prayers is because of avidya. Yeah, avidyaya yacha vidyeti jnata. Yeah, so the person of discrimination will be able to discriminate what is the path of ignorance, what is the path of knowledge, and so on. And this is where our friend Yama is again praising Nachiketa and saying, look, you are making those discriminations and you have chosen. I offered you so much things. I've offered so much wealth and all the pleasurable things. You refused everything, but you are seeking that information that will give you knowledge. So you are going towards Shreyas. I'm so proud of you. But look at the majority of the humans. They're following the nature, the path of prayers, which is directly influenced by avidya. So that is what we discussed a couple of weeks ago. And then before the 2 weeks ago, we discussed about in detail the concept of ignorance or avidya. We looked at the ontological position of avidya. We looked about what is it, where does it come from, and so on. And then we had a view there. Look, this ignorance possibly is a evolute of matter, that it is probably an evolute of the tamas, the sattva, rajas, and tamo guna of the Mula Prakriti, and that is where this ignorance comes from. And we've discussed about all the 5 koshas of the body and how every component of the kosha of the body is made up of sattva, rajas, and tamas, and how the tamas aspect is what that is contributing to ignorance. Then we also discussed about the various types of ignorance of the mundane things in this world. We had a discussion about the neurobiological concepts of ignorance, which I thought was very interesting. And we also discussed about cosmic ignorance and how that cosmic ignorance covers the jiva. Okay, so we took a lot of realistic position. What is a realistic view of avidya? And this slide here on the left, I've got this realistic view where there is the jiva, and inside the jiva is the antaryamin. The jiva is covered by this subtle covering called the linga sharira, which is always with the jiva until the point when it attains moksha. This linga sharira is always with the jiva. And then how we discuss that cosmic ignorance is in the linga sharira. Yeah, and this is all these yellow dots are. So linga sharira is a key material covering of the jiva, the subtlest of the material covering, which is where the cosmic ignorance is. So I'm going to pause there for a minute and a brief quiz as to what the stars are. The yellow rounds are signifies the cosmic ignorance or the avidya. what is the stars here that we discussed about? So who is going to answer that question?
Although it is karma, it signifies the karma that we...
Excellent. So Padmajaji, thank you very much. That is the correct answer. The stars are the karmas. So it is the karmas are also, these are the imprints that also happens on the linga sharira. And this karma and linga and the karma and the avidya, they kind of link up with each other. It is the avidya that prompts us to do certain actions that leads on to karmic imprints. And it is the karmic imprints then that dictates and decides what kind of life that we're going to have in future. So I put this one as a quiz, but never forget this concept that it is the linga sharira that is where the cosmic ignorance is, and that is where the karmic imprints on the linga sharira is, which dictates the career of souls. So we also discussed about this fact that because the avidya is in the linga sharira of the jivas, from a realistic perspective, so that is the views of Advaita and Visishta Advaita, from their perspective, which is, as you know, is two schools of Vedanta, from their perspective, the cosmic ignorance is on the jiva. Okay, so that is called Swabhava Ajnana Vada. So what does it, the definition means? Swabhava means the intrinsic nature of the souls. Ajnana means the souls themselves do not have a knowledge of their intrinsic swabhava and their relationship with the Supreme, who is there as their Antaryaman. And the Ajnana is that they're covered by this linga sharira, that they're so intimately attached to this material covering that they've actually, through ignorance, assumed that it is the material covering actually is themselves, which actually it is not. Yeah, so they've assumed that their body itself is them, which it is not. And Gita discusses this in great detail. So now, for completion's sake, before we move to the next verse of Yama, which is one of the most beautiful verses in that particular section, we need to then also think about what is the concept of avidya from a Advaita point of view or the monistic point of view. So we need to take these two things into account and have our own rational discussion and understanding of it, and then get the context and understand what is it that Yama is teaching Nachiketa here. So at the end of the day, your view or my view actually does not matter. What matters here for Katha Upanishad is what is the perspective from which Yama is approaching this problem. Okay, so before we get to that, let us have a discussion on what is the Advaita view of what is the role of avidya. So this is a bird's eye view. This is a bird's eye view of what the Advaita view is. So that is called Brahma Ajnanavada. So from Advaita perspective, this avidya actually covers the Supreme or superimposes on the Supreme. So however you want to describe it, but fundamentally the avidya is on Brahman. Whereas in Dvaita and Visishta Advaita, the avidya is on the jiva. So that is the fundamental difference between these schools of Vedanta. And I think we need to be aware of this before we move to the next slide. So in the ignorance in realism, we have discussed enough last week. So we said it is also called Ajnana, it is also called avidya, it's also called Maya, it is also called Tamas. And it is a evolute of matter, and it is comes from the tamas, which we discussed. And we also discussed about this ignorance. What is it? Who is it? Who has it? How did it come about? Where is it? When is it? And why is it? We discussed that. And I also told you that from a realistic perspective, this ignorance is a real dravya or substance. And there is a very famous verse in Srimad Bhagavatam 2.10.12. You should memorize it. What does it say is that Dravyam karmascha kalascha swabhavo jivayevacha yad anugrahataha santi nasanti yadupekshaya. So what that verse of Bhagavatam says is any dravyam means substance, which includes ignorance also. And of course, karma and all other things in existence, they are under the direct control of the Supreme. Okay, that is what is the key message of Bhagavatam, because he is the independent supporter of everything and he controls everything. including all dravyas, and ignorance is one of the dravyas. Okay, so it is this bird here, the Brahman bird, that actually controls the ignorance of the jivas in the Swabhava Ajnanavada. And how does he control that? By his supreme Achintya Adbhuta Shakti or omnipotency, that he does that. Okay, we have seen a number of verses from Mandukya Upanishad, Shvetashvatara Upanishad, Gita, Skanda Purana, and the Brahma Sutras to try and understand that from the realistic perspective. So what is happening from the monistic perspective? So monastic Vedanta, or Advaita Vedanta as it's called, also considers ignorance as an important concept. And ignorance also has got some synonyms: Maya, Avidya, and Upadhi. And last week, we had a very brief discussion of the ontological status of what is this avidya or ignorance. From a Dvaita perspective, it is a sat, it is a real entity. Whereas from an Advaita perspective, so they have formulated this third category of reality called sadasad vilakshanatva. So that this avidya is actually called something which is neither real nor non-real, but it is unreal or mithya. Okay, so we discussed that at that point of time, saying that avidya is not actually a tangible entity. It is not something that you can actually say this is real, that it actually has got a time-space relationship, but it is something that is very nebulous. And it is from the, I'm just taking an Advaitin's shoe here and explaining what it means. And it is anirvachyatvam. This is something that I cannot explain, but it is neither real nor it is an illusion. It is this third category which I cannot actually explain what it is. So that is what is called sadasad vilakshanatvam, which is a postulate of the Advaita school. So I put a very important problem here of philosophy that folks discuss, and that is how it has been over the last several hundreds, if not thousands of years, from the time of Badarayana or Veda Vyasa, of trying to understand reality and illusion. How do you know this? So from an Advaita perspective, they have a formula for what is unreal or mithya. So they have got this definition called Vimatam mithya drishyatvat. Okay, so that is the view. There is whatever I perceive and see is mithya. That is their fundamental axiom. Okay, so whatever I perceive in this world is mithya stroke an illusion, because it is an object of perception, like the snake which is perceived on the rope, or a silver that is perceived on a conch shell. So one of the questions that can come here, and I want you to be thinking about this problem, is can the existence of occasional illusions like a rope, like a snake on a rope, or a silver on a conch shell, be a justification for the generalization of the illusoriness of the universe at large? Yeah, there are some exceptions, but exceptions never become the rule. That is a very simplistic view of looking at this problem, but we will try and explore this further. So now that you understood what is that avidya from an Advaitin's point of view, now let us look at how does that affect Brahman. Remember, I told you it's Brahma Ajnanavada. So what happens is that this avidya, which is, as I said, synonymous, it's also called Maya, it is also called Upadhi. So what happens, this is from an Advaitin perspective. I'm just giving you that view. So what happens there is this Maya covers this Nirguna Brahman. And when this Maya covers the Nirguna Brahman, or this ignorance covers the Nirguna Brahman becomes the Saguna Brahman. Who are the Saguna Brahmans? This is all the Vishnus, the Vyuha forms, all the Avatara forms, your Krishna, all these chaps that are celebrated in our Itihasas and Puranas, they are all Saguna Brahman. They actually do not exist. They appear to be existing because of the superimposition of ignorance on Nirguna Brahman. Okay. Now, there is a further superimposition on the Saguna Brahman called this Upadhi. Upadhi is also another name for avidya or maya. They are all the same ontological categories with different names just to confuse folks who are deeply interested in philosophy. But Upadhi is also avidya. So that Upadhi then supposed to superimpose on Saguna Brahman, and that leads to jivas, that are you and me. So in this view, which is quite interesting, it is an interesting hypothesis. So in this view, Saguna Brahman and the jivas are all mithya. They're actually not there. They are actually Nirguna Brahman. And they appear to be so like the snake on the rope or a silver on a conch shell because of this superimposition of avidya or ignorance on the Nirguna Brahman. Okay, so this is the overall bird's eye view of what the monistic view on this problem of ignorance. Who has ignorance? Okay, now the other thing that needs to be said here is the same ignorance, which is also called avidya, when it is superimposed on the Nirguna Brahman, then becomes the material world or the prakriti. Okay, so that is also mithya. So in this equation, Krishna, Rama are mithya, you and me are mithya, and this material world is mithya. And there is this only this fellow who is called Nirguna Brahman, who apparently is Satya. So that is the view of the monistic school. So when you look at this view, Maya, the first event that happens is Maya covers Nirguna Brahman. So it is called Brahma Ajnana Vada. So that is the first event that happens. What are the subsequent events? Other unreal things evolve. Saguna Brahman, Jiva, Prakriti, etc. Okay, so this Jiva then has forgotten that this is Nirguna Brahman, that I am Nirguna Brahman. He has forgotten that. So he is going through the cycles of samsara. Okay, so this is the bird's eye view. So again, the problem here is the view. If you look at this from a very high level view, the problem there is ignorance falls on the Nirguna Brahman. Okay, ignorance is on Brahman. Okay. There is a very famous verse in Mundane Upanishad called Yes Sarvajnaha Sarvavid Yasya Jnanamayam Tapaha. So this Brahman is celebrated as Sarvajnaha. He is celebrated as omniscient. So the problem of philosophy there is, how can ignorance cover the all-knowing principle? Yeah, so these are all problems of philosophy for which answer is yet to arrive from the monastic schools. But I'm just giving you this interesting twist to this problem, because most folks and friends who like Advaita philosophy, including myself, but from their perspective, they have actually not able to dissect and understand Advaita in its core essence. So that is a problem that many monastic friends have, but that is their problem. They have to answer these questions as to how an omniscient being can have ignorance superimposed on it. Okay. In fact, the monastic school is so, how shall I put it, is so interesting that it even says, for a Nirguna Brahman to become omniscient, it needs to have a superimposition of ignorance. You need to have a superimposition of ignorance for something to become omniscient. I don't know how you can square that circle, but it is their particular view. Okay. So coming back to this, so the problem there is this avidya is there, so we are going through samsara. When we realize that we are the same Nirguna Brahman, then that ignorance is gone, and that is our moksha. But that ignorance itself is not a real entity, that it is a mithya, which actually is non-different from an illusion. Mithya and asat are actually, in the deepest sense, are one and the same. It is just a creation by the monastic schools to have the trifold classification of reality. But for those of you who are interested in this area, you can look it up. There are lots of material out there to actually understand that mithya is actually asat. So in that sense, Monastic philosophy is Buddhist philosophy. There is actually no difference. Yeah. So from the realistic school, what the realistic philosophers will say is, only when there is a real disease, you try to eradicate. What need is there to eradicate an imaginary disease? You don't go to a doctor with an imaginary disease so that the doctor can eradicate it. You go to a doctor for eradication only if they have a real disease. So this ignorance on something must be a real entity. Otherwise, there is no point in talking about eradicating something that does not exist. So that is another thought that I want to plant in this session. So now this problem of how this Nirguna Brahman has avidya on it, and then becomes Saguna Brahman, and then becomes Jiva, and then it goes through samsara is quite a complex concept. And I certainly don't have the intention of covering every aspect and angle of this philosophical problem. But I will just give a few headlines, bullet points for you to think about, because I honestly hope that all of us who have been congregating here every Sunday, who deeply think about these problems, I think they should have access. They should be able to access and understand what is it that our monastic friends are talking about. Harish has raised his hands. Harish.
Yeah, just one question. There's also an argument about asat versus impermanent. Can you elaborate on that point a little bit?
Yeah, so definitely, Harish. So so this is again is a very unique monastic problem, that a definition that what is sat and what is mithya. Okay, so and asat. What is sat from a monastic school? Anything that is forever is sat. Anything that is permanent is sat, and anything that is non-permanent is mithya. Okay, but that is not how the world philosophies, Western philosophies, and also the realistic schools of Indian philosophies would define that. What they would do is, something that is there forever is called nitya, whereas something that is not there forever is called anitya. Both nitya and anitya can be satya. Yeah, there is no reason to define anitya as mithya. Yeah, so that is where the crux of the problem is. There is no prescription in the Vedas to actually say any entity that is anitya is actually mithya. Okay, it is not. My grandfather is anitya. He was there for 79 years and then he went and he disappeared. He was anitya, but that doesn't mean he was not satya. He was really there. So this is where the problem is. I hope that answers your question. So it is about anitya is equals mithya. So this is a unique concept of monastic philosophy, which other schools don't agree. So they would say anitya can also be satya, nitya is also satya, whereas asat is something that is never there in all three times. In the past, in the present, and in the future, it is not there. That is why it is called asat. Whereas a nitya can be there in the past, or it can appear in the future, or it can be in the present for some time. But when it is there, it has got a space-time correlation. So it is satya. So this is the difference. Anyway, so the bullet points of, we are in the avidya angle of monastic schools. So as I said, we don't have time. We can spend a month talking about this. But I just want to capture some bullet points for you to think about of how can avidya fall on Nirguna Brahman? Is it possible? So the questions there, if that avidya falls on Nirguna Brahman, when did that covering of avidya on Brahman happen? Okay, if avidya is non-sentient, which it is, how can avidya have the ability for self-initiated action and cover on Nirguna Brahman? Who made the superimposition happen? Did it just happen just like that out of the blue, or somebody made this superimposition happen? Okay, did the superimposition happen on the whole of Brahman or part of the Brahman? Next question, does this avidya penetrate the inner core of Brahmanhood, or it is just an external covering or a superimposition? Here is another question. After this avidya is removed, once I know I am Nirguna Brahman, what guarantee is there it will not happen again? Where is Nirguna Brahman? And where did when did the superimposition happen? And where did this happen? So these are all the questions that come about when you take this view. And I can tell you to this audience with a sense of confidence that no answer has been provided by the monastic school yet. This is their problem. They have not been able to answer these questions. Okay, and to say this Jagat is Mithya, this world is Mithya, again is an interesting Buddhist concept, but whether it is tangible in this world of experience is a different matter. Okay, so for example, I've just put a provocative statement: world's Mithya, unreal. Is it problematic, or is it an acceptable hypothesis? So the way I put this is, ignorance is part of this world. If we say Jagat is Mithya, then ignorance is Mithya. So everything in this Jagat is Mithya. If that is the case, why did Vedanta Sutra started off with this, with the second sutra that gave a definition of Brahman as Janmadhyasya Yataha? He who is the creator of this world is Brahman. We know the famous Taittiriya Upanishad. Yato va imani bhutani jayante yena jatani jivanti yat prayanti abhisambhishanti tad vijijñāsasva tad brahmeti. This fellow is called Brahman because he is the creator. And if he is called Brahman because he is a creator, will his creation be false? Something for us to think about. I don't have an answer, but I'm just giving you roots for you to make your own inner journey and understand as to how difficult it is to accept this view that there is this great Brahman, but he's created this universe which is false. Okay, so that is, you're accusing Brahman of cheating us by creating an illusory universe. This is what the problem is from the realistic philosophers who celebrate this Brahman as an abode of infinite auspicious attributes. Jayatirtha, for example, he captures the same point very beautifully. He says, Janmadhyasya yataha iti bhagavata sutrakarena Jagat udayadi nimitta karanatvam parasya brahmano lakshanam abhihitam nacha jagat satyatamantarena tad vastavam sambhavati. So if Veda Vyasa says the definition of Brahman is he who is the creator of the universe, then that universe has to be real, is the Jayatirtha's view. When Acharya says Bahuchitra Jagat Bahuda Karanat Parashaktihi Ananta Gunaha Paramaha. So what does that mean in Dvadasha Stotra? When you look at this multifaceted universe, this amazing universe, this beautiful universe that works so intricately, what do we understand? We understand the greatness or the intelligence behind this that has created this universe. Yeah. So that is the philosophy that we should get when we understand that this universe is real. So that is one of the polemics there, the arguments on both sides as to why accepting this world as Mithya is problematic. So coming to the problem at hand. So Brahman is non-material. We accept that. It is self-luminous. So self-luminous is an important concept. It is also called swaprakashatva. Swaprakasha is self-luminous. That means something that knows about itself, something that knows it exists, something that is aware of its own consciousness is swaprakasha. For example, you and me, we are swaprakasha to some extent, in the sense that we know ourselves as conscious beings. Yes, that is called self-luminosity. So here is the problem. If Brahman is non-material, it is self-luminous, how can ignorance penetrate its inner core and lead to Brahman's ignorance of its existence and its non-difference from Jiva, who has still not come into existence? Okay, so you're looking at the very first event from a monastic perspective. Yeah, this avidya has to cover, right? So here is the problem. I have another illustrative slide coming up. Ignorance is always external to Brahman. Ignorance, even from a monastic perspective, cannot penetrate Brahman's inner core. This Brahman is akhanda or partless. So there is no way in which avidya can actually penetrate or cover a part of Brahman, because Brahman is partless. Brahman should always be, so in this problem, this Brahman, this red round blob here, should always know that it is Brahman. There should be no ignorance that it is the Jiva here, because what is the first event? Avidya has covered Brahman. Next problem, Nirguna Brahman has got no attributes or qualities. When you say something is covering, then you have to say something is covering some aspect of something. But for a Nirguna Brahman, what is being covered anyway? No answer. After it is removed, as I said, what guarantee is there it will not happen again? This is a problem. Here is another problem. Where is Nirguna Brahman? Has anybody given that answer from a monistic perspective? Absolutely not. Nobody knows where this Nirguna Brahman is. From a realistic perspective, we know from Purusha Shukta, Pado asya vishwabhutani tripadasya amrutandivi. Purusha Shukta has said us that fellow is in Vaikuntha in three different aspects, and one aspect of him is here in Mrityu Loka and in the material creation. But can anybody tell us where Nirguna Brahman is? Here is the problem, because for us to say that something exists somewhere, you need to bring two things into the equation. You need to bring time and you need to bring space into this coordination to say where Nirguna Brahman is. For the time and space coordination to be there, time has to be real, space has to be real. But from a monistic perspective, time and space are not real. They are mithya, they are asat. So if you have that, or if you accept that there has to be real time and real space, then the concept of monism is gone, because in monism there can be only one sat. Time and space cannot be sat. So these are all the problems that monistic philosophers face, and they are yet to provide a rational explanation to that, or I'm yet to listen to anybody who has actually given me a proper rational view of where is Nirguna Brahman. So I hope you find this interesting and provocative, because my intention here is we are students of Vedanta and we should not just accept some dogmas. What we should do is we should do our own research and understand various views and then arrive at a conclusion. Yeah. So where did Avidya come from is a big question. Where did Avidya come from? When did it cover Brahman? Did it cover? No, same again, questions are coming again. Where did Avidya come from? There is no answer. Okay. Avidya is a jada, non-sentient. It cannot have an independent ability of self-initiated action. Veda Vyasa has put a sutra there. Rachana anupapatteshta na anumanam. It cannot do things on its own. If Avidya is an insentient thing and cannot do things on its own accord, how on earth can it cover this big being called the Nirguna Brahman? How can Avidya cover Brahman on its own accord? Who made this superimposition happen? How can Avidya generate a diverse, well-orchestrated universe, as Brahman is not a creator in monistic philosophy? It is just a vivarta. It is just a superimposition. Superimposition is not creation. Yeah. So when there is a rope and you see the snake, snake was not created by the rope. It is just a superimposition of the rope. So in those kind of situations, how can you get this diverse, well-orchestrated universe? Here is a bigger question. The question of Jiva arises only after superimposition of ignorance on Brahman. Okay, so I think the problem here, this formidable problem for monistic philosophers is this view reduces Brahman to a position of helpless submission to its own ignorance. Yeah, so this is that is where it boils down to. And in that situation, the question arises, we should not be worshipping Nirguna Brahman, we should be worshipping Avidya. We should be worshipping ignorance, because this is so powerful that it can actually cover the Nirguna Brahman and bring all this artificial appearance of the universe. Yeah. So I hope these things, now, as I said, I'm just giving you provocative views of how the Vedantic polemics goes on. And this has gone on for hundreds and thousands of years. Veda Vyasa in Avirodha Adhyaya, he actually brings up this philosophy and discusses about this. Check that out. Check about what is Vedavyasa's view on Buddhist philosophy. What is Vedavyasa's view on monastic philosophy? How Vedavyasa equates monastic philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. All these things get discussed in the Avirodha Adhyaya, which is a fascinating area of study. So here is my summary slide, which I hope you will like. So all that I've told you about the monastic view boils down to this. Okay, so it is pitch dark. It is Amavasi. There is no moon. It is very, very dark. You are inside the house. There is no electricity in the house. There is no light. You are sitting in a dark room. There is no light. It is night. You are sitting in a very, very dark room. You have taken a blanket and you have covered yourself. You have closed your eyelids. Okay? These are all the things that have happened. It is dark, no electricity. You are sitting in a dark room. You've covered yourself with a blanket and you have closed your eyes. Everything here is external. And this is the Brahman. Will I not know I don't exist? For me, when I sit in a dark room, covered with my blanket and my eyes closed, I certainly know I exist because I have self-luminosity of some extent. So if Brahman is Swaprakasha, no amount of external covering can conceal the essential inner nature of Brahman. Okay, these are all basic stuff. Yeah, it feels like hardcore philosophy, but this is basic kindergarten stuff. How can me covering myself in the blanket make me forget who I am? This is exactly his monastic philosophy in the nutshell. So think about this problem. So this avidya is insentient, it's unreal. How can an insentient penetrate the inner core of Brahman and make it forget that it is Brahman? If you take this view where the blanket, the eyelid closing, the blanket, no electricity in the room, and it is pitch dark, all this is equivalent to avidya or ignorance. So this is a big problem that monastic philosophers face, but they have not been able to answer that question. Good luck to them. So when you look at the realistic perspective, is it not a problem in the realistic perspective? Let us look at the same analogy here. I am a jiva. I am sitting in a room. I have closed my eyes. I have put a blanket around me. There is no electricity in my house and it is pitch dark. Okay. So even the jiva is self-luminous. Brahman may be Vibhu, Jiva may be Anu, but still he is self-luminous in the sense that he knows he exists. But the question there is, if he is self-luminous, why does he not know his true nature? Why does he not experience his bliss? Why does he not know that there is the supreme being who is inside him as his Antaryamin? Why is there so much ignorance in the inner core of the Jiva, such as you and I? So the realistic view then says, this is the Achintya Adbhuta Shakti of the Supreme who is inside you as his Antaryamin. He is capable of doing that because he is an omnipotent being who uses Prakriti as a wheel to give that ignorance of yourself, relationship with the Supreme, and also your relationship to the external world. The question from the realistic perspective is, why does he do it? If he is so, if he is so merciful, if he is so benevolent, why does he do it? Why does he let the jivas forget these things? So I have just put a question there, and I just want one of you to take this on because I've been going on for a long time. So who wants to answer this question as to why should God do that? Why should he give us the ignorance and let us suffer in this material world? So who wants to take that question? Okay, so Deval.
Isn't it so that, I mean, I'm looking at that figure and I remember you saying something in previous lectures about giving time for something to mature.
Brilliant, Devalji. Perfect answer. So that is the God's way. It is this material universe is our examination. So we have to pass this exam and come out in flying colors. What is our flying colors? Is our liberation. So that is what we just call Satya Sankalpa. This is the design of the universe. The jivas have to do that exam called samsara, and when they are matured enough, then they come out into liberation. So Sutra, Brahma Sutra again deals with this. There is a very, very important sutra called Pumsatvadivas Asya Sato Abhivyakta Yogat. So it compares to how when you are a child of 4 years, you don't become childbearing. Yeah, when you are a child, a lady, a girl, for example, doesn't become childbearing. She has to grow, she has to mature into an adult, then she becomes childbearing. Similarly, a male, he has to grow before he can generate that seed. So everything needs maturity, and that is what the Supreme does with his great mercy and Achintya Adbhuta Shakti, that he not only provides this material universe for the souls to work out their salvation, but in doing so, he gives them time. Each soul has its own rate of maturity. And when they are matured, he offers them that liberation. Okay, so how does that happen? I just wanted to remind you from Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 6, when we did this verse, Yata Somya Purusham Gandharebhyo Abhinadaksha Aniya Tam Tato Atijane Visrujet. Tasya Yata Tatra Prangva Udangva Agangva Pradyangva Pradmayita Abhinadaksha Anito Abhinadaksha Visrushtaha. Tasya yata abhinahanam pramuchya prabruyet etam disham gandhara etam disha vraja iti sagramad gramam pruchan pandito medavi gandharena upasampadyet etameva iha acharyavan purusho veda tasya tavadeva chiran yavan vimokshe Ata sampatsya iti saya esha anima aitadatmyam idam sarvam tat satyam sa atma tattvamasi shvetaketo. So if you remember, the 7th example is exactly about this, of this jiva has been put into the forest with his eyes covered, and it doesn't know where to go. But what does the jiva do? It talks, it gets directions from different individuals and eventually makes its way to Gandhara. So that is what our journey is, and that is what actually samsara is from a realistic perspective. So I hope you were able to appreciate the polemics and the extreme views. They are in two different spectrums, the monastic views and the realistic views, as to where ignorance is, why do we need to take the ignorance out, and what is our destination. So I hope in the last 1.5 classes that I've been able to give you an introduction of this area, but it is actually much more complex and much more fascinating than that. But that is for our own self-study. My humble plea here is, without doing our own research and understanding, we should never accept any dogmas, whatever the dogmas might be. We should actually go and do our own research rather than just clapping our hands and say, what an interesting philosophy. No, it is our duty to do our own journey and understand what the truth actually is. Okay. So, as I said, in the realistic perspective, this Supreme, with this Achintya Adbhuta Shakti, gives the ignorance. And what does this Supreme do? What types of ignorance? And the Shastras discuss about Paramachadika, Jivachadika. Paramachadika means the ignorance that is a veil or a curtain between the Jiva and Brahman. Jivachadika is certain inner aspect of the Jiva itself is concealed. And also there is an ignorance of what is the relationship between the Jiva and the external world. That what is that ignorance? The ignorance that the Jivas think that they have a sense of independence and they identify with the material body. So this is what the whole concept of ignorance is. Yeah. So what do? We have Linga Sharira, we acquire Stula Sharira, then we go through samsara. When we do sadhanas, we eradicate our karmas, and then we go to Chaturmukha Brahma in Satyaloka, and then we cross the Viraja Nadi, and then we attain liberation. So again, Jayatirtha in one of his works makes a beautiful statement. Paramatmano Atyanta Binnasya Jiva is infinitely different from Brahman. Of course, chapter 15 of Bhagavad Gita is all that. That is what it is about. The last 15. Dva yumau purusho loke kshara akshara evacha ksharaha sarvani bhutani kutasto akshara uchyate uttamaha purushastu anyaha paramatma iti udakrutaha. Anyaha. That is exactly what Jayatirtha is saying here. Paramatmano atyanta binnasya. But what is the situation of the jiva? Swataha chit ananda atmakasya pi jivasya. Jivas have swataha ana chit and ananda. But why are they not able to experience that? Anadi avidya. It is because of the anadi avidya, ignorance. What has happened because of ignorance? Kama, desires, self-desire. Because of that, what has happened? Karma. Anadi kama karmadi nimitto. And he goes on. So Jayatirtha captures the sequence very well in this. So now I need to pull you back to the verse proper. Duramete viparite visuchi avidyayacha vidyeti jnata vidya abhipsitam nachiketa sammanye natva kama bahavo alolupanta. This is the last line. So to impress upon you the last line, Bahavo Alolupanta. What Yama is saying is, you did not go towards these desires, Nachiketa. You're such a great being. You were going towards Shreyas. But look at the mundane being, Bahavo, all these folks, that is you and I, Alolupanta. We are ignorant and we are shaky, ignorant and shaky. We don't know what to do and we are distracted in our lives. Okay. This is the state of the common man, that they are all distracted. Bahavo alolupanta. And how do they operate in this world? So the next verse is again one of the most beautiful verses of Katha Upanishad, and it is also an important Upanishad verse that comes in other Upanishads, and I think it's well worth spending some time talking about it. And to be honest, I was so looking forward to coming to this verse, but without discussing all these polemics of monistic and realistic views of ignorance, I actually could not come to this verse because I would not be able to do justice to this particular verse. So hopefully over the next 15-20 minutes before we close this session, I will be able to handle this verse in all its glory. So what does Yama saying about the mundane beings? Avidyayam antare vartamanaha swayam diraha panditam manyamanaha dhandram yamanaha pariyanti mudaha ande naiva niyama yata andaha. So Yama is actually telling folks so badly. He's telling us all off by this verse. And in the current times in which we are living in the current times of all the events that are happening around us. This is so timely. Avidyayam antare vartamanaha. So this is Katha Upanishad. Atharvana Upanishad or Mundaka Upanishad also has a very similar verse. Avidyayam antare vartamanaha swayam diraha panditam manyamanaha janganyamanaha pariyanti mudaha ande naiva niyama yata andaha. So the only differences between Katha Upanishad and Mundaka Upanishad is, in Katha Upanishad the word dhandram yamanaha is used, whereas in Atharvana Upanishad the word janganyamanaha is used. And also in Katha Upanishad, if you go to the pure versions, the ancient versions, that is, if you go to what was the script or what was what was it in 2000 years ago, how was Katha Upanishad? Vartamanaha is a new inclusion, but in the ancient Katha Upanishad, it used to be Veshyamanaha. So if you take classic Katha Upanishad, it used to read as like this: Avidyayam antare Veshyamanaha. There is another Upanishad called Maitrayani Upanishad. Okay, so this is part of Krishna Yajur Veda again. Maitrayini Upanishad also has the same verse. Avidyayam antare veshtyamanaha swayamdiraha panditam mannaha dandramyamanaha pariyanti mudaha andenaiva niyamayata andaha. So 3 different Upanishads, the same verse with slight changes appears. Maitrayini Upanishad is actually even more interesting, because when this particular verse is discussed in Maitrayini Upanishad, this is an incident between Asuras and Devas and so on. That is how the Upanishad goes, where the Upanishad discusses, look what Nachiketa did. You have to be like that. So actually Maitrayini Upanishad refers to Nachiketa, the incident that happened in Katha Upanishad. So that's interesting. But all 3 have the same verse. So what does that verse actually stand for? So let us take the first verse. Avidyayam antare. Okay. So antara means you are sitting inside a fence. So what this verse saying is, the mundane people of the modern world and the ancient world, they are all sitting in this fence. Vartamanaha, Veshtyamanaha is fence, literally. Avidyayam antare means they have covered themselves with this fence called ignorance, and they are sitting inside and they are feeling very, very secure. That is, you and I, we have so much ignorance, but we are sitting inside this ignorance feeling very, very secure. And we have assumed swayam dhiraha. We are very wise, sitting ourselves in this fence. Panditam manyamanaha. We have also assumed we are very learned. This is the state of the world. Over the last several days, this is the state of the world. And over the last 5,000 years, that has been the state of the world. And Yama captures this beautifully. Avidyayam antare vartamanaha or veshtyamanaha. With this ignorance, we are feeling wise and learned. But how stupid we are. We are like dandramyamanaha. So the next line talks about dandramyamanaha. Okay, and if you go to Mundaka Upanishad, it is called Janganyamanaha. So what does that mean? So Yama is saying, these fellows, these you and I and all these people everywhere, we are sitting on this fence. We think we are wise and learned, but actually these fellows are Dandramyamanaha. Okay, Dandramyamanaha has got so many meanings. So we'll just take Drumavate Vyartam Jivanti. What that means is, Dandramya means like a tree. We are all there like a tree. A tree lives for 700, 800 years. A Californian redwood lives for 700, 400 years. It might give shelter for birds and it may give shade, but for itself, it's got no purpose. It is there for 700, 800 years. What is the use of the jiva that is there inside that Californian redwood? Absolutely nothing. It is just there for it. Because of all the karmas that it has done, it has taken birth as a redwood, but it can't do anything. So it is wasted. It is just there. That is our situation. We are all alive for 80 to 100 years, completely wasting our lives. And Yama says, you are like that tree, useless, complete waste of time. And then what? Pariyanti mudaha. Pariyanti means paritaha. Paritaha means going around aimlessly, which is what we are doing. We are all surrounded by this ignorance and we are going around aimlessly, and these fellows are fools. And Yama is actually telling us off big time. So we are all dandramyamanaha, pariyanti mudaha. And we are going around aimlessly where? We are going around aimlessly in the samsara. Round and round in circles, aimlessly like idiots we are going, because we are not even thinking about the bigger things in life. And Janganyamanaha also captures the same concept of going around in circles. So avidyayam antare vartamanaha swayam dhiraha panditam manyamanaha dandramyamanaha pariyanti mudaha andenaiva niyama yatandaha. That is the situation of society then, and that is the situation of the society here. Andenaiva niyamana yatandaha. So we have all got blind leaders, and we are all blind, and we are following a blind leader who everybody is ignorant, and we follow the ignorant, and eventually what happens? We all fall down in a pit, which is samsara. Round and round in circles. Some of us may stay here. Some of us may even go to the deepest hells eventually, because we have covered ourselves with ignorance, which is the state of the material world. Ande neiva niyamanaha yata andaha. So this is a beautiful verse worth memorizing that captures our state of what we are in Katha Upanishad, which is one of the earliest of Upanishads. Okay, and Keno Upanishad also talks about this. There is another interesting verse from Keno Upanishad. As you know, Keno Upanishad is called Talavakara Upanishad, which is part of the Samaveda. Avijnatam vijanatam, vijnatam avijanatam. So what does that mean? There is actually an Arabic proverb that talks about this. He that knows not and knows that he knows not is a fool. Shun him. Okay. So this is our position. We don't even know that we don't know. And that is how we are running our world. Okay. In the Bible, Matthew 15:14, there is another very, very beautiful verse. If a blind man leads a blind man, both will fall into a pit. Okay. What is that Matthew's verses are capturing the same spirit of what Katha Upanishad is saying. Ande neiva niyama yata andaha. Okay, so this is such a profound statement of the current state of the society in which we live, and also the state of ourselves as to how we are. You know, unless we first recognize that there is a problem, we can never find a solution. There are most 99.99% of humanity runs the life as how Katha Upanishad has stated. Okay, unless we recognize actually we are ignorant. Actually, there are a lot of things that we do not know. And actually, we don't know so many things, but that is the reason why we are suffering here. We don't even ask these questions. And why do we not ask these questions? It is because of this ignorance that is surrounding us. So when we spoke about the monistic view and the realistic view, you need to bring all those ideas and understand the profound philosophy that Yama is talking about here. So here is my question. If Brahman is sitting covered by avidya, Yama is then telling Brahman off from one perspective. Whereas in another perspective, if Jiva is sitting covered by avidya, Yama is telling you and I off. Yeah. So from Yama's view, at least from the following verses that I am going to talk about. So you need to look at the contextual relevance. What is the prakarana is very important. What are the verses before? What are the verses that come afterwards? And take that into consideration and understand what is Yama's view, which is what we are interested in. And what is Yama's view? Yama's view is ignorance covers Jiva only. Swabhava Ajnana Vada is what Yama is talking about. Otherwise, Yama is only rank 13 in the Vedic pantheon. Yeah, he is rank 13 along with Surya and Chandra and Yama. They are all Vedic pantheon 13, whereas the Supreme Brahman is the #1 Vedic rank. So Yama can't be telling off the supreme ranked person like you are surrounded by avidya and you are falling into a pit and so on. It just does not make sense. So something again for us all to think about and understand what is the spirit in which Yama is talking about rather than making our own hypothesis here. Okay, so immediately when he has said avidyayam antare vartamanaha in the very next verse, and I will just deal with this verse and close today's session. So in this verse, he says, who are these fellows who are full of avidya and ignorance covered by them? What is their state of affairs? And he says, na samparayaha pratibhati balam pramadyantam vitta mohena modam ayam loko nasti parayiti mani punah punaha vasham apadyate me. Okay, it's a beautiful statement here. Na samparayaha pratibhati balam. So let's look at this very first verse. Na samparayaha. So we did samparaya before. So who is going to talk? Who is going to explain what samparaya is? Anybody wants to take this on, please? What is samparaya? Okay, silence. Okay, that's fine. So samparaya.
Is it not following? Like Madhva Sampraya is following.
That is sampradaya.
Oh, sorry.
So we are talking about Samparaya. So anybody else? Okay, Samparaya. Sorry, who was it? Sushruth?
Achieving moksha.
Yeah, thank you, Sushruth. Correct answer. So Samparaya means moksha. Okay. So in the previous verse, you might remember this. Yasminidam vichikitsanti mrutyoho yat samparaye mahati bruhinaha tat yo ayam varo gudam anupravishto na anyam tasma nachiketo vrinite. So Nachiketa says, I want to know only about that Samparaya. Don't bother me with all these beautiful women and wealth and car and stuff. I don't want that. I want to know only about Samparaya, Moksha. Just teach me about Moksha. What happens in Moksha? How is the greatness of Brahman in Moksha? So Samparaya means Moksha or the state of liberation. And we did the etymology of that. Samyak Parasmin Ayanam. Para means who? Parabrahman, Vishnu, Krishna, whatever you want to call in Vaikunta. Samyak Parasmin Ayanam. That is completely with full knowledge, staying in companionship with the Supreme in Vaikunta is called Samparayaha. So what Yama is saying is Na Samparayaha Pratibhati Balam. So the childish fellows, Balam there means childish. The childish fellows of the modern world, they actually think there is only this beautiful material world that you will have pleasure. There is nothing beyond this. There is no Samparaya. There is nothing called the eternal world. There is nothing called eternal bliss. It is everything here. You make fun, have fun and die when you are 75 or 80 years. Finish, chapter close, innings over, book is closed. That is it. You are finished. Yeah, that is what is the view. Prevailing view and the common view. And Yama is saying these childish fellows who are surrounded by ignorance, they think na samparayaha pratibhati. They say that there is no samparaya. Pramadyantam vitta mohena mudam. Pramadi means ignorant. Mudam means deluded. So these ignorant and deluded folks like you and me, what are we doing? Vitta mohena mudam. Vitta moha. We are so deluded by vittam. Vittam means what? Material pleasures, material money. Vittam essentially means wealth. So these modern fellows are so stuck up with their own material wealth, and they are full of ignorance and deluded. The next verse is very important of what Yama is saying, and it is a beautiful etymology of, and also splitting of the sentence. And immediately he actually tells again people off. Yama is actually really tells people off, and I think we should get into that shoe and take whatever Yama is telling us, and we should actually take it personally and feel bad about our own state and try to rectify it. So what is Yama saying? Na samparayaha pratibhati balam pramadyantam vittamohena mudam ayam loko nasti parayitimani punah punaha vasham apadyate me. Let's look at the third line. Ayam loko nasti parayitimani. So these mudas, these ignorance of the modern world and also the ancient world, but particularly prevalent in the modern societies in which we live, how do they run their affairs? They say, Ayam loko nasti parayitimani. So what does that mean? So this sentence actually gets opened up in several angles, at least in 3 different ways. So what is number 1? Am Lokaha nasti paraha. Am Lokaha means this material world that we are living in, that alone exists. Na asti para. The other world, the eternal worlds, the worlds of the Supreme Being, Vaikunta, whatever it is, they don't exist. Only Ayam Loka. So who are these fellows? The Charvakas and the atheists. These fellows, they are here, they think as long as they are here for 75, 80 years, this world alone exists. And I will make fun, I'll have enough fun when I am here. Because nasti paraha, there is nothing beyond this world. So when I am here, let me have fun. Okay, that is the Charvaka or the atheist view. Okay. The other way of looking at this is Ayam Lokaha means this perceivable world alone exists or real. Para does not exist. That is, para means the Supreme Lord does not exist. So that is the atheist view. This world alone exists. There is nothing called concepts of God. Or this world alone exists. Let me make fun. There is nothing called the world beyond. Okay. Next is the other view. Ayam loko nasti para iti. So you can break it in various places. So when I say ayam loko nasti, which means this material world in which I am living, or at least I appear to be, actually does not exist. That is another view. Ayam loko nasti para iti. Only that para, the Brahman alone exists. Ayam loko na asti. So that is the monistic view. This perceivable world does not exist really, which is equal to asat. What is unperceivable, the para, that only is real. All others don't exist. Ayam loko nasti para iti. Then you have the nihilist. Ayam loko nasti, nasti paraha. Okay. Ayam loko nasti. This material world that we are living here is an illusion. Nasti paraha. There is no other world. There is no God. They are also illusion. That is the nihilistic view. What I perceive does not exist. Para also does not exist. Okay. So when you look at this view, na samparayaha pratibhati balam pramadyantam vitta mohena mudam ayam loko nasti parayiti mani. So what happens to these fellows who have these kind of views of life? Ayam loko nasti paraha. Ayam loko nasti parahiti. Ayam loko nasti paraha. What happens to these fellows? Punaha vasham apadyate me. These fellows who think that these fellows who have these three different views, these fellows again and again, they come unto me. Apadyate me, they come under my clutches. Punaha, again and again. Vasham, they come under my rope. Apadyate me, my rope, they come again and again and again, and they go through samsara, they may go to naraka, they may get fried in kumbhipaka, again they come to mrityu loka. So these fellows can go on and on and on. So our friend Yama is actually telling us all off, and we need to be very wary of. First thing is we need to recognize that we have a problem. You and I actually have a problem. And we need to recognize this problem is because of ignorance. And we need to recognize that we are ignorant. Without recognizing a problem, you can never find a solution. And Yama is actually reminding us of the folks who are ignorant. How do they behave? Na samparayaha pratibhati balam pramadyantam vittamohena mudam ayam loko nasti parayiti mani punaha vasham apadyate me. So from next class, what we will do is we'll deal with this beautiful verse, Shravanavapi Bahur, that particular verse, and then we'll make our onward journey, because what I want to remind you here is our friend Yama has still not come to the core philosophy. And if you thought there is so much of philosophy that has already been packed, Yama does not come to the core philosophy until he has finished 14 verses. And the real proper philosophy in this particular Valli actually starts when he makes this most profound statement. That is how he starts his philosophy. Sarve Vedaha yatpadamamananti tapamsi sarvani cha yadvadanti yadichanto brahmacharyam charanti tatte padam sangrahena bravimi om ityetat. Okay, so he starts talking about this Om Tattva in the 14th verse. So we all have to wait until we hit this particular verse, but between this verse and this verse, there is still profound philosophies that Yama is going to be talking to us next week. So we will do that next week and start addressing the Sarve Vedaha mantra. And after that, following that, we have to do our Gita Chintane chapter 11. So we will start doing some kind of an internal search as to which team is going to be doing, and we'll confirm this over the next few days. Okay. So on that note, I'm going to close today's session. Krishna Pranamastu, and we can take any questions. Okay, so looks like we got a dead silence. Either some of you are shell shocked, or I've given you an information overload. Okay, anyway, have a think about it, and next week we can capture this. So if there are no questions for today's session, can I ask Harish to take us through Om and we close today's session, please? Thank you very much, everyone. See you next week. Take care.
Thank you.